believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of the Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Rendes, also known as Ricky Rendes, and a great episode for you today. Today, I have a returning guest, and really one of the past guests that I've been the most excited to talk to again, because last time he was on, I had a lot of positive feedback, and for many good reasons, because one, he put out probably one of the most important documentaries in documentary history, and two, it was a phenomenal conversation. He has an incredible ability to just have deep conversations and just very much like myself can kind of discuss everything and anything and likes to dibble dabble on so many different topics and get deep into them and really analyze them and reflect on them. And who I'm talking about is the filmmaker, Mikki Willis, who is responsible for probably one of the most censored and one of the most watched documentaries in history. And Plandemic was a phenomenal documentary, as I'm sure most of you guys know and watched. And then he has a new Plandemic documentary. It's Plandemic 3, The Great Awakening. And it's a phenomenal documentary. You can find it on plandemicseries.com. Go on there, check it out. All his movies are there for free because he really cares about getting this information out there. And as usual, you'll be able to find links to my guests' website and all their stuff in the show description. And in the show description, you can also find links to how to support the show. And like I always tell you guys, this is a value for value show. If you get some value out of the discussions I bring to you, please consider giving some value back. It doesn't have to be financial. You can rate the show, review the show, tell people about the show, help fight against the algorithms that are suppressing shows like mine. But if you can financially support the show, there's plenty of ways of doing so. You can support us monthly on Patreon, and no amount is too little. If a small percentage of the people who listen and watch the Ripple Effect Podcast donate as little as $1 a month, I could easily do the show full time. So please consider joining our Patreon page and supporting us monthly. You can also send a one-time donation to our PayPal account, our Venmo. You can send crypto to our crypto wallet. And like I always remind you guys, these links are in the show description and on my website, rippleeffectpodcast.com. Another way of supporting the show is checking out our brand new merch store. Tons of really affordable, cheap stuff and high quality. We have hoodies, kids' clothes, mugs, and much more. Please check out the merch store. You can go to the Ripple Effect Podcast and merch.com if you want to go directly to the merch store and check it out. It's a great way of getting some cool stuff and supporting a show that you love. We also have a couple sponsors, and all these sponsors are friends of the show, people that I've been a fan of, people that I've been a fan of their work or a fan of their products for a long time. First one being Content Safe. Matt from Content Safe has been on both my shows, the Ripple Effect Podcast and the Union of the Unwanted, a bunch of times. He's a great guy, and he created a great company and service to help protect podcasts like these. And he does that by syncing all my video channels together. So I upload to one location like a YouTube or a Odyssey or whatever one I choose to upload to, and then magically that video thumbnail description appears on all my video channels. And this helps me fight against censorship, because if I get censored on one platform, the video will be available on many other platforms. So if you're a content creator, YouTuber, podcaster, check out Content Safe. Let them know you're a listener of the Ripple Effect Podcast, and Matt will definitely hook you up and take care of you. The next sponsor is Richard Groves, the University of Reason, and the very popular autonomy courses. Matt from Content Safe is actually a graduate of the University of Reason, and he would definitely say that it was helpful. So if you're at a crossroads in life, if you're looking to expand on some skills, learn some new skills, connect with a liberty-minded, freedom-minded community, check out the University of Reason. Use the links in the show description, and you can help yourself and the Ripple Effect podcast at the same time. And then my last sponsor is Rob Wolf's amazing product called Element Electrolytes. If you're fasting, if you're doing paleo, keto, any type of diet like that, this is the product for you, because this is a healthy way of staying hydrated. You get the electrolytes you need to help against all the symptoms that are due to dehydration, like muscle fatigue, headaches, cramping, and many other things that are due to dehydration. But you can also optimize your body and mind using Element Electrolytes, because it has the dosages, the amounts that you need to really get the most out of your workouts, the most out of your day, and the most out of your life. There's no artificial colors, no artificial flavors, only things you need, nothing that you don't need, or nothing artificial. And the formula is backed by tons of science and research and information. Rob Wolf is an OG in the health and nutrition community. He's been on many different podcasts, including Joe Rogan's. He's also been on the Ripple Effect podcast a few times, so definitely go into archives and look for those past appearances. And we go into the Element Electrolytes origin story and how he came up with the formula and all the science backing it and much more. So check that out. Use the links in the show description and you'll get a free gift with every purchase. And I think that's it. Enjoy this amazing conversation with filmmaker, thinker, philosopher, and spiritual friend of mine, Mikki Willis. And I'll talk to you in the next one. Peace.
Touching on a very important subject, because it's one of the reasons, as you saw in Pandemic 3, The Great Awakening, I used the infamous quote from Karl Marx that communism can be summed up in a single sentence, which is the abolition of private property. And so one of the reasons that as we get older, we begin to care about things like that is we start to accumulate property. We buy our first home, we have land. Suddenly that calls us to be more aware and concerned with what's happening in our county and our city, the tax codes, who's running. That matters, because now it's not just, look, I pay rent, I pay $2,500 a month to some guy, don't really like him because he's the guy that reminds me all the time that I owe him money. I don't need to take care of his place. Back in the 90s, I did a study on what makes a ghetto, and that answer too can be summed up in a single sentence. It is lack of ownership. So when you don't own your property, you don't care about it as much. When your neighbors don't care about their property, then why are you going to mow your yard? Why not have your car on jacks in the front yard? Why not, whatever, punch holes in the wall because it belongs to the man anyway, that's only there to remind you about owing him money. And so you start to actually want to vandalize his property because you build up so much resentment for having to pay somebody for a place that is often not repaired when it needs to be repaired because somebody else's responsibility and they don't get to the toilet fast enough or the sink or whatever it might be. So you build up this resentment until you think, well, heck, why am I going to treat this person with respect when he doesn't respect us? And so let his place crumble. It's fine. It's not my place. And that is, part of this goal is to keep people from owning property. And, through Marxism, they've convinced a generation of people that that's the benevolent thing to do, that, that's how we all come in and get equalized in this, as the workers of the world unite, which is just a ploy to get everyone to surrender all of their belongings to the state. And, already in Maui, they're trying to get the state to purchase Lahaina. There are laws in other states within the United States that are working on creating state-owned grocery stores. It's happening. Communism, here it comes. And so many people are still sitting there thinking it'll never happen here.
Yeah, and all these countries, historically, when you look at it, it's always sold to you the same way. It's to protect you, right? Like if we're living in China or any communist country throughout history, the government never tells you they're removing freedoms or your rights because they want to control you. They tell you they're doing it because they're protecting you, because they're, they're helping you. And but that's that's an interesting perspective on poor areas, ghettos, and stuff like that, because maybe listeners know or don't know, but you did grow up, on welfare. And how did that affect your feelings on the social,
Immensely, immensely. I didn't know this, of course. If somebody would have told me this about myself years ago, I would have laughed in their face. I have been rejecting wealth most of my life. And so it was ingrained in my brain. These are what the government systems actually do to people. There is a point when people need a helping hand, but not a handout, just a hand up. And unfortunately, few people know the difference between that. And people get accustomed to receiving like the COVID payments, right? We receive a little bit of money. This is cool, man. I'll just sit and play video games today and get a couple $1,000s from the government. This is fantastic. Let's not open this place up. Let's stay locked down, because this is kind of cool that we get a break. And for a lot of people, it was a break. But if you get attached to that break and dependent upon those services, it may mean the destruction of your life, inside and outside. Inside meaning the way you view yourself in the world, and what your potential might be and what your destiny might be. It can cause you, it killed my mother's dreams. She had never traveled outside of the United States in her entire life. Always had a dream to go travel, see what Europe is like. Never was able to do that. And for me, what it caused as a young man, being raised on welfare, mother with 4 kids on her own, her husband died of a heart attack. And I was told from a very young age, I'd get a new bike. I remember I got this beautiful Schwinn Stingray, and I was so proud of it. But it was like, keep that in your closet, not in the garage, not out in the open, in your closet. My closet. Why? Because if a caseworker comes over, if a welfare worker comes over, and they see that you have a $200 bicycle, they might yank our assistance away, because you're not supposed to. They don't know that it was a gift and your brother helped organize the money and do all of that. They just see that you're living beyond your means. And then as I got older and I was in my teens, and I had I was really into music, as you mentioned at the top of the show. And so I ended up getting, it's probably very inexpensive, but it was still this really loud stereo system in my room, giant speakers, 4 feet tall. And I was so proud of this. I'd crank it up. My mom would be like, keep that thing down. Because if caseworker comes and they hear that you've got something like that and they want to see it, they're going to wonder why the money is spent on frivolous things like this. And so what that did was it wired me that any show of success was wrong. Any thriving, owning things was bad. And we needed to just get by. And this is the way that these programs end up wiring people. And so that it had a hold on me for all of my adult life, to where I had a lot of major opportunities. And I used to say I was bad with money, but the truth is I was doing with money what I thought I had to do. I would score a big job as a filmmaker or a writer, and it would be amazing. I'd suddenly have a couple $100,000 in the bank. That money would be gone in a month. I'd find a way. I'd give it away. I'd buy things for my friends. I'd donate to places. Whatever it would take, just so I can get back down to just barely making it, because I can't have all that money in the bank. And I never even realized what was at work. I really didn't. And so all these people that are in these inner cities that are a product of the state and think they're getting help from the state, well, to a certain degree, we all might need to receive from time to time. But the goal should be getting off of that assistance and into a sovereign state of taking care of your own life and your own family, because there's nothing better than knowing that I'm making a life for myself and I'm feeding my children, not the government. I'm feeding my children. I just bought my wife, it's not brand new, it's 2020, but new to her, just bought her a new car, and it's beautiful. And it's just it's safer car for my kids. She takes my kids around all the time, and I didn't want them driving a little 2018 Toyota Corolla, so I bought her a Navigator. And it's like, this is great, you know, but there's always part of me that's like, I have to check in with that kid going, is it okay to have this kind of car parked in the driveway? You know, what if the caseworkers come? Oh, wait a minute, there's no caseworkers anymore. Those days are over. But it's so ingrained into my brain that I tried to hide my success forever, which became, in a sense, kind of sabotaging my success because I didn't want too much. And I created bad habits of, you know, how to get rid of money really fast as a result of that, or sabotaging jobs just because I knew that it's going to come with a lot of financial success, and not even looking back now and going, wow, I think I actually unconsciously sabotaged that because I was too afraid that it would lead to an appearance that I shouldn't be presenting as. And so, you know, long answer to your short question is that's what happens. And it can be detrimental to people. Now I'm saying to people, buy property, buy your home. Don't let them take it away from you. Be careful who you sell to, because BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard and all these companies are choosing these private LLCs to go up, and so you don't know it's them, and they're buying all the homes and they're offering above market price, and during a time when it's hard to sell a home because of the interest rates. Be very careful. Like let's hold on to our property, because when we let go of too much of it, we lose the power.
Yeah, it's funny how many things in our childhood, you know, almost subconsciously, we don't even know it, but it has effect on what we do, what we do, how we react to certain things. So much of our adult life is completely influenced by, you know, who we are, what we went through as kids. And I mean, this is why I'm like kind of conflicted with, like, you know, this idea of, yeah, I was born in Portugal. My parents are farmers. They had very simple lives. You know, they would be considered poor in American standards, but they didn't look at it that way, right? Because everything's perspective. And, you know, I've told this story a few times on the show, so my apologies for people hearing it again. But I remember going to Florida for the first time. My wife has family down there, and as an immigrant in America, like much like yourself, we didn't have family vacations. My family vacation was, we would go back to Portugal every other year or every year, and I would spend all my time there. So people would be like, "Hey, you ever been to Cape Cod?" I'm like, "No." "You ever been to Florida?" "No." "You ever been here?" I'm like, "No." I'm like, I go to one place and that's it. And I kind of took it for granted when you're a kid, because it's just like, oh, we got to go back to Portugal and, you know, hang out on a farm for 2 months and then come back to America. But, you know, looking at the way they lived, you know, as a kid, I looked at it like, okay, there's you know, I would never want to be back here. They look like kings and queens now, you know, the way they live in America, because they have material things. They have a house, they have, you know, running water, even these simple things. But, you know, when I remember going to Florida with my wife, and she likes to drive by like nice neighborhoods, like, oh, look at these, you know, this famous person lives here and that, you know, and that doesn't appeal to me at all. But after a little bit of looking around, you start seeing some young 16-year-old and some new Bentley and all this stuff, and all of a sudden you're like, damn, what did I do wrong with my life? You know, like how, you know, how, you know, and you start kind of looking at your life from a negative perspective. And then I remember the same year working and I live in Massachusetts, unfortunately. I live in Massachusetts, unfortunately, of course. But we were doing construction in either Springfield or Holyoke, you know, really, really poor areas. And we're working there. And I remember the detail officer's like, hey, you know why we're here? I'm like, yeah, you're here for the detail. And he's like, no, not for traffic, to protect you. Because he's like, this is one of the worst streets in the city. And I'm like, oh, shit. And then next thing you know, I see real crackheads walking by. I see houses that, you know, have no windows and no door, and just, you know, people waiting at the PVTA, you know, in dirty and ripped up clothes. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so grateful that I live in a small little town that's safe, a town that has a community. You know, I never have to really worry about getting robbed. I have a car. Maybe it's not the newest car, but I have a car. I have a house. Maybe it's not the biggest house, but I have a house. And it's like, so everything's perspective, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it's funny, like, and I think this kind of goes back to what we're talking about initially, this idea of like when you're young, that capitalistic philosophy of like, go get it. And like, it seemed very unappealing to the young person who's like, the artist like you and I who like want to play music. And we're like, no, I don't need much to be happy. I just need community, friends, the ability to do something creative, and all that money and ones and zeros, it doesn't intrigue me. And so with my kids, it's hard because it's like every single thing you say to them, every conversation is important, and I want to be involved and in their lives as much as possible, because as your films have documented and you've talked about all the time, I mean, everything is trying to mold them into what they want them to be. And
Yeah.
I want to have as much influence as possible. But in a way, so it's like, so I guess the give you a long rant myself. That European lifestyle, where it's like it's just, like it's socialism's almost looked like it's okay, because it's like, oh, it just means we enjoy our life more, we spend more time with our friends and family. And then the capitalistic lifestyle of like, okay, go get it, go be a go-getter, work is always good, you never turn down work, and like that's your top priority. But I think there's something in the middle, right? Like you see people like you and I who understand, we're almost like radical right people in regards to our understanding of how important family values are and some of these things. But then we're also that artists who still care about others, and it's like, so this divide and conquer thing works, but at the end of the day there's probably a lot of gray area. And
Yeah.
how do you, like, as a father and looking at like, okay, your priorities with like trying to obviously put food on the table, and also your creative endeavors, but yet trying to be as present as possible, like how do you balance that all out?
I have no idea.
On to
I actually just came back from a lunch meeting where that came up, because when I hear my friends say they're busy, I'm like, just come hang out with me for a day if you want to know what busy really looks like. Just to, and I'm only saying this because I want to open up the realm of possibility for people to understand that it's a good subject you bring up. And I don't know how to explain how it is that I'm accomplishing everything that I'm accomplishing right now without getting into some level of talk about this divine intelligence that governs our lives. And some might call it God or whatever. I don't know how to get in the conversation authentically without touching into that, because something is governing my life now that is far more intelligent than I am and will ever be. And that allows me to be currently overseeing the production of 4 movies, which is insane in itself, to be founding a school, a startup company with products, immune boosting, restoring products to help people get healthy out there that have been damaged. Going to screenings every weekend in a new state, doing Q&As, doing podcasts, and coaching 2 baseball teams, both my sons, which if anyone has ever done that out there, that in itself, there's at least 5 events a week. So there's practices, there's games, and then there's a lot of work we do in the backyard together, helping them get better on their skills. And then there's the personal time of being with my kids, like this morning, and saying, turn the TV off. Let's spend some time together. I got you for 20 minutes before you leave. And I want to connect with you. I don't want you to be distracted, and I won't look at my phone either. Let's take a moment. Okay, Dad. And then we talk about, this cool thing they got to do yesterday, learning from some amazing musicians that came into their little homeschool and co-op to teach them. Erica Badu's drummer, Erica Badu, her drummer came in, and a dear friend of mine, Shala Ray, incredible singer-songwriter, came in to teach these kids musical skills. So we got to talk about that this morning. But when I look at my schedule, and so that's about half of it, what I mentioned. There's a lot of other things that I'm involved in that are just, interpersonal things of helping keep our movement together and mediating between people that are arguing, and there's a lot of other things that I do just kind of on my quote unquote free time. And when I look at my schedule, look at my calendar, which represents probably an eighth of what I actually accomplish in a day, I have no idea how it's possible that all that is happening in my life right now. And I'm not stressed out. I have always taken on a lot of work, but traditionally I would say I was probably doing a third of this or a quarter of this previously in my life and feeling totally stressed out, totally overwhelmed. So I have no idea how I'm doing 400 times more, and I still feel very relaxed and centered. I have no idea how that's happening, other than looking into the possibility that something else is working in my life, and I just have to be in service to that. And the more and more I kind of open to that's what's really occurring in my life, the more this grace occurs in my life, of where another thing comes up. It's like, and I think there's no way I can say yes to this, but for some reason I find myself saying, yes, I'm going to take this on too, add it to the list, and it gets done. And I don't, it's not flawless. I still have to, check myself and do my best to be on time to every meeting, and be integral to everything I've committed to. And every now and then someone will say, it took me 3 days to get a hold of you. I get it. I apologize for that. Let's find it. Let's create a new system. I have a meeting in 1 hour from now to talk just about that. What is a better way for my teams, different teams that I'm working with, to get messages to me that I can respond to? Let's create a system so that we can optimize that communication. Because if you're waiting for me before you can, let's say, launch the next newsletter, and I don't get back to you in time, then it delays it a day or a week or whatever. That's a problem within our system. So what can I do to optimize that communication? And how do I give up more and more control? But also, I would never give up all, because there's a responsibility I have to make sure that communication happens to the public in a way that I am committed to, and that we don't just become another company. And I've tried to let go before, and I found, other people that were working with us start to try to sell things, get too sales heavy through our newsletter. And then I get complaints of, oh, now you're, and it's like, I don't want to do that. I'm not here to sell people anything. So I need to have enough control to say, don't cross that line. Let's not see people as a commodity. Let's not take that bait to, now that we have a big list and all this, to suddenly try to, grift on that. Let's just not play that game, because the people we're fighting against, I believe they were probably born good, and through incremental choices like that, of just having that opportunistic mindset, they suddenly find themselves behaving in a way that is not who they really are, and they lose themselves. And so let's be very careful with every incremental step along the way, that we maintain integrity in what we do, and that we don't change. Because I've seen that, over 30 years in Hollywood, I've watched a lot of friends, really good people, suddenly gain a certain amount of recognition, and it changes them. They start to believe the hype. They start to absorb all the compliments. And I've learned that that's incredibly detrimental. And the person that absorbs those compliments is the one that ultimately loses, because they lose themselves. And so how do I, receive the accolades and the love for the work that we're doing, and never forget where it actually belongs, that I'm as grateful as the people are that are giving me compliments, that I actually get to be used as an instrument to convey some of these messages to the world. It's like, that's what a gift that I actually get to do that with my life. It's not me, it's to the degree that, of course, I'm doing the interviews and editing and doing physical work. So to that extent, it's me, but it's not me. And I think that that's what a lot of people get caught up in, which is what changes them so much, is start to feel too special, you know, instead of just like a public servant.
Yeah, and
It's a noble thing to be.
Absolutely, and I love the fact that you highlighted all that, because I mean, one thing, we have a little family business too, and even just with my podcast, which is my passion project, hopefully my full-time gig at some point, but I'm still that artist where I'm just like, I want to do everything myself because I want a product that I can back and I can be happy about. And even if it would save me tons of time, you know, having somebody help me or whatever, and I've had people offer, I'm just like, no, I want to be proud of what I put out there. I want to make sure it's the message that I want, you know, and I don't want, I don't, it's almost like, you know, when you're in a band, right? And you're in a band and everybody has their own view on what the sound you're trying to create. And they have, you know, and it's like this way, it's like, okay, if it sucks, it's on me. It's not on anybody else. And if it's good, I get the credit, and you know, I'll take the responsibility regardless if it's positive or negative. And you know, that is the hardest part of doing anything, is finding people that will do it the way you would do it if you're, you know, when you're not.
That's yeah. Let's touch on that example you just brought up, because I think it's a big one. Why is it that so many of our most incredible musicians throughout time, things have not ended well for them? Like, at what point are we going to look at the pattern of their life to say, how is it that Elvis, Kurt Cobain, just go down the list of all these, from actors to musicians, what is it that led these people into drug addiction, suicide, horrible, horrible, demoralizing behavior? What happened? I mean, they're on top of the world. They have a gift. They're given a gift. They have a dream to get that gift out to the world. And it seems that the bigger that gift is spread to the world, the more damage that happens to these people. What is that thing that happens to them? And
Well,
that's the thing I'm talking about. Like, did you want to say something?
oh, I was just gonna say, I'd love to hear your opinion. I mean, my personal just journey with music, music was, you sometimes you hear this theory that people get in psychiatry or people who try to resolve their own issues, and
Yeah.
and they're in it for the wrong. I'm like, musicians are kind of the same thing. It's like you're
Yeah.
creating a art that helps people with their issues, but you're creating the art to try to resolve your own. And
Yeah. Yeah. So that absolutely plays a role in it. Sometimes the reason that people get into it is to try to fill a void or heal a wound or whatever it might be. So that can sometimes play a part into the character of the person who ultimately ends up becoming more damaged. Absolutely. But the other side of it is that, for me, imagine the radio in your car. That little radio in your car, if it adapted to the idea that all that music coming through it was they own that was them. Imagine that little radio thinking, listen to this music, man. I mean, like, I am the Beatles. I am all of it. This is coming through me. But in the same way, music comes through the body. It's an instrument. It's a receiver and a broadcaster. And as crazy as it would be for the little radio to claim responsibility for all the music that comes through it, is just as crazy as it is for the person to not recognize that the music is coming through them and not from them, in a sense. And so when people remember that, when they remember that they're literally just given the gift, like that little radio is given the gift of having the ability to tune its instrument into a frequency that receives these different channels that then allow it to broadcast this incredible thing we call music through it. But it's simply a device being used to allow for the spreading of the gift of that music. And if we see ourselves as that, and so many actors and people don't, they believe the hype. People tell them that you are God, and they go, I am God. And it's very dangerous to that person. I would love to see a time in the future where we stopped idolizing idols altogether, and we worshiped the music itself. So just appreciating the music and appreciating the musician for facilitating the flow of the music to happen through them, but not to think that I am the music, not to ever become so arrogant that we get caught up in thinking that I am the genius, I am the God, I am the rock God, whatever it is, right? I am, everyone tells me I am, so I must be. I'm the legend. It's very, very dangerous. And there's very few archetypes of people that are strong enough to withstand that type of belief system once it lands within you. You know, it's maybe no one's strong enough to withstand that. It's ultimately destructive, and I can relate to it because there was a time in my life where I didn't realize what I'm speaking to you about right now. I didn't realize it. So compliments were coming to me, and I could feel the difference of my personality was changing. And then I was feeding on that, and I need more of that. I want to be around people that recognize me as that, because I actually kind of need that. When I'm in an environment where no one knows who I am, I don't feel complete. I don't feel special anymore. This is what happens with a lot of these actors who just start to become more and more extreme and weird, just to say it bluntly, because they hit the top and they're known. You know, I'm Madonna. And now look at her today. If you scroll through her Instagrams and her personal stuff, the woman has lost it. She's freaky to watch. She makes me uncomfortable to watch her talk for 1 minute. Makes me uncomfortable. What happened to this woman who was singing like a virgin in the 80s, you know, and was talented? And what happened to this woman that she feels that she needed to, you know, stretch her face back with years and years of plastic surgery and become so shocking in her speech and weird in her behavior that she's constantly trying to get the attention that she used to have when it was innocent and pure, and she'll never get it back. But instead of being okay with moving to the next stage of her life and blessing whatever her new path is, and being grateful for what she had and more grateful for what she does have right now, she's trying to hang on to what she had. And the combination of that just makes a strange human being. And if we can understand that where these things lead, it doesn't end well when we start to believe the hype, and we don't remember we're just a little radio tuning into a frequency. That's it.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I agree and disagree at the same time. It's you know, I do see what you're saying. I know, and you hear a lot of people talk about creativity. Like, where did this idea come from? It almost seems like it didn't come from a internal source. It came from an external source, or something else that maybe is hard to explain. But I also, you know, I grew up listening to a lot of music, and even writing. You know, all my music was written by me just trying. It was my therapy. It was me trying, you know, and I think that's why people say when you write, it is therapy. You feel better. Because I think a lot of times you're forced to, like therapy, you know, you go to a therapist, you have to deal with the trauma, you have to talk about it. And I think talking about it sometimes helps you reflect on it and resolve it to some extent. I think that's what we try to do when we write music. You know, a lot of music is very personal, you know, so it's hard for me to, and even like my music was always, you know, I always try to write like nobody was going to see it except me, so that way I could go as deep and into as dark of a place as possible without any restrictions of like concern that, oh my God, one day somebody's going to read this and they're going to know these are my inner thoughts or my inner feelings. And so because music was always so personal to me, sometimes I struggle to grasp this idea that, like, okay, maybe it wasn't mine, you know, because it felt like what I was trying to do. Like, I'm sure you know, I'm 38, and I remember growing up, I was a metalhead. I grew up on metal and industrial music. I loved anything that was extreme, you know. So I liked dark techno industrial music, you know, everything from to heaviest metal to a mixture of both. And but I remember Slipknot, the first time I bought the Slipknot album. And it was so dark, and it was so, I remember trying to describe it to my friends. I'm like, if you were in the head of a psychopath, and you could take their thoughts and create music out of it. I'm like, this is what it would sound like. And that's what
Mhm.
appealed to me. It was like stuff that was, because when you're an artist, like you find, you face the darkest of thoughts, of feelings, of trauma, and because you face it and you don't neglect it or you don't pretend it doesn't exist, you realize that like most people have these dark places, and
Mhm.
evil exists,
Mhm.
darkness exists. And so I guess my point is like it seems very personal, you know, in many cases. Like what would you say, like, because I'm sure, you know, you obviously played music, like didn't you feel like it was personal? Wasn't, were you not inspired even with your art that you do now, your filmmaking, your, you know, I know you did photography, music, like it doesn't feel
It's
personal?
both. It's both. So it's part of the dualistic reality that the mind has a hard time understanding, that it's both. It's totally personal. It is the story of me, which is the story of we. And so any song that's ever become a hit out there, anything that's too personal that people can't relate to is not never become a hit. It's when we write from that deepest place, we become the spokesperson for the masses. So we literally are able to communicate something through our music, through our lyrics, through whatever screenplay, through our movies, whatever it might be. And it is absolutely, truly, this is my very personal experience of what happened in my life. And it just so happens that's the story of humanity. So many other people have had that same story. And so in that sense, it's your story and it's our story. And that's what I'm talking about. We actually we're not in disagreement in this. It takes you and your courage to experience your life, to then channel that experience, no matter how deep and dark it is, into a piece of art in the framework of a song, and then to be courageous enough to share your therapy out in the world and tell the truth about your insecurities and your fears and your failures out in the world. And it just so happens there are 280 million young men just like you who've lived exactly the same life. And you're speaking for them. You become the spokesperson for them to go, this guy gets me. I wasn't able to articulate this, or maybe I'm just too afraid to articulate it, or maybe I didn't articulate it because I thought no one would understand me. Like this was my personal experience. It's only happened to me. I'm the only one that's had an abusive dad or whatever it might be, whatever the story might be. No, it turns out there's a lot of people who've had that story. It's the human hero's journey. And so we get to speak on behalf of it, like the little radio that gets to play on behalf of the music. And so it's both. It's both. And it's, then take it down to the instrument, the guitar in your hand. Now that guitar is an instrument, and that guitar can be a cheap instrument or a finely tuned, incredibly crafted work of art, that when it plays the song, that song resonates with the humans that hear it at a deeper level because of the perfection of that instrument, because of the resonance of the strings combined with the particular kind of wood that guitar is made out of, and how the neck is shaped, and how the pickups are shaped, and what the strings are made out of. All that helps define a texture of a story that shapes the delivery of that story, which then shapes the way people receive that story. And so the guitar deserves some credit too for being so beautifully crafted to be able to convey and translate that gift of music in such a way that it's optimally received by its listeners. And so it does deserve some credit too. I'm not saying that we deserve no credit, because a prayer that I say to myself is, thank you for allowing this to come through you, because I know that I can shut it out. I know that I don't have to be brave, and I can just go on and live a normal life much easier with no threats of security or anything like that. And I can go get a job somewhere tomorrow working as a filmmaker for some other production company, making a bunch of commercials about products I don't care about. I can do that. Probably get paid a heck of a lot more than I'm getting paid right now. But I at this stage I can't, because I understand now that that would never leave me in a place of being fulfilled. And what more is important in life than feeling that I'm on my path? I'm living, this is what I came to do. And anything less than this is me bowing out. And I just can't at this point. I just can't. Not like there's great immense pressure I put on myself, but I just understand the outcome of that is looking back one day and realizing that I could have helped. I could have done something. But for fear of being ridiculed or canceled or being shamed by my community, I let the fear of that stop me from actually stepping up to do whatever I can in my powers to make sure that my children have a future and have a nation. And I don't want to be 80 years old and looking back and thinking, wow, I possibly with a little bit more effort from me and millions of other Americans, maybe we could have stopped this. Maybe. But one thing you know is by not trying, the answer is clear, you allow it to happen. And so, you know, I think we're actually in agreement because it's you and it's something much greater than you all at the same time. It's that dualistic thing that we just have such a hard time of understanding, that something can be tragic and terrible and one of the greatest gifts that you've ever received at the same time.
Yeah, and another thing you see with celebrities, and I think maybe if you're doing it, because I think some artists, you know, like you hear Joe Rogan talk about it, like he was told to not do a 3-hour show, and he's just like, you know what, I'm just going to do what I enjoy doing, and then I'm just going to let things fall into place. And you see a lot of the good musicians like that, you know, the bands that last past, you know, whatever era they were in, the ones that stick around are the ones who, you know, that they were creating art for the right reasons. When they get a lot of fame, a lot of times they end up getting imposter syndrome, right? Like they're like, you know what, I don't feel special, I'm just doing what I love. And then all this fame and celebrity, you know, attention came to me, but that's not what I was pursuing. You know, like as you know, like Kurt Cobain hated being famous. It was like he just wanted to play music. And so that does happen too, you know. But do you think that the ones that are, you know, they end up falling in love with being a celebrity? I mean, they're just in it for the wrong reasons, and maybe they're just they have some internal unhappiness that they're trying to fulfill with the wrong things.
Yes, and on to that Kurt Cobain thing for a moment, because I find that interesting too, because there was a point when I was trying to change Hollywood and before I left it. And I realized I reached a point where it was like such an uphill struggle. And so many people wanted what I wanted, but nobody was willing to actually stand out and speak out against the machine. And then I realized, I said, listen, I used a sports metaphor. I said, this is like I signed up for the NFL and I'm complaining about being tackled. That's just part of the game. So if you want to play the game of Hollywood, then play the game. That they have their own list of rules. And it's actually what had me step out and create the thing that really put us on the map way back in 2005, which we created something called Elevate Film Festival, which was a global filmmaking competition to challenge other filmmakers to create work that mattered. And you know, countries around the world, we'd give them an assignment and give them 7 days to bring back a short film to show us mostly what's right with your world that you live in. Show us the heroes, show us the good news that the media for some reason tends to ignore. And that was a result of me realizing that, you know, there are different leagues of baseball, there are different leagues of football, all the way down to flag football. You don't want to get tackled, play flag football. You don't have to get tackled, but you can still play the same game without the impact, the physical impact. And I realized, I was like, instead of trying to come into the NFL and telling them we need to stop tackling each other, never going to happen. That's tackle football. So why don't we create a game where some of the destructive nature and the stuff that has us as artists and filmmakers and storytellers feeling unfulfilled because we're not saying what we came here to say. We're saying what somebody else is paying us to say. Why don't we create a independent league, a new league where we can create our own rules? And that was what we did with Elevate Film Festival. Let's create our own rules. We get to actually say what we tell stories about. No one's going to tell us, not a sponsor, no one's going to tell us that we can't speak this truth or tell this truth. And so, you know, when I look at someone like Kurt Cobain, I have very little sympathy for that kind of attitude of the, you know, I love Radiohead and whatever, but I'm so sick of these artists that, you know, go out there with their immense talent, they pursue a career, and they can always stop at any moment. You can limit the growth of you can have a song that can go wild beyond your expectations, cool, but you don't have to take the next offer. You don't have to take the next major concert. You don't have to do the next album. You get to choose that. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for these artists that are born with a gift. And then suddenly when that gift explodes in the world, then all they do is cry victim. Because that's the game they signed up for. They're getting tackled. And so I had to like step up and beyond that and go, listen, I get to control where my life goes. I get controlled to the degree that I get tackled, if at all, by not taking the bait of every offer that comes to me, because each one of those offers might lead you into a new game and a new league. And you need to be aware of that. If I say yes to this, does this move me into a new, and I've had a lot of offers, particularly since the release of Pandemic, a lot of offers, hosting shows, being part of some of the major conservative networks, as you can imagine, a lot of things. And I have to stop and think about that. And I say, wow, what an amazing opportunity, and to make this amount of money and have it guaranteed, and to do a little show every other day or whatever. The lure of that is attractive. But I have to stop and think, is that going to change the structure of my life in such a way that I'm now going to be at the beck and call of other people who then start to control what I can and cannot say? And maybe that network is cool right now, but look at Fox is doing amazing work a couple of years ago, and then they just pivot and there's always been a problem with Fox, but they were actually heading in a cool direction for a while, where I never thought I'd love Fox News, but all the truth tellers are now on Fox. This is amazing. And then suddenly they start lying, and they start lying about January 6th, and they start lying there's never any most honest election ever. They start saying these talking points. Do I want to be stuck in a system where now I'm one of the lab rats and I have to go along with this narrative now? How soul killing would that be, to have to go out and to make these statements that are not true? But there's no money in it that would convince me that that's the right move for me.
No, I was just going to say, in Kurt Cobain's, he died at 27.
A lot of them died at 27.
You're right. And if you were in your 20s, because so you're looking at it from the perspective of like, you're the older, wiser, more experienced, you've been through some stuff that can help you examine like what's really important, what decisions.
Yeah, I hear where you're going.
You're in the 27-year-old. Well, he was making these decisions even younger. I don't think obviously grunge wasn't even popular at the time. He's the one who kind of killed a lot of the hair metal bands from the 80s and brought in a whole new genre of music. And then really even the music industry didn't see that coming. It's everybody jumped on board afterwards, like typically they do. It's like, oh, people like this now, and let's start signing every grunge band. But would the 20-something-year-old Mikki, do you think that you would be capable of maybe making this similar mistakes? Because
I would, but it's not just based on age. It's because I didn't understand that there's a higher power out there. And I was very, very against anything to do with religion or even the word God. And without that understanding of what I have now opened my heart and mind to, understanding that there really is a benevolent, highly intelligent force that is behind this gift we call nature. There's something. I've had direct experiences that no one can convince me I hadn't experienced, and through various, extreme trauma to psychedelic work, to meditation, to near-death experiences, a lot of different moments that it's taking me working, picking up body parts. You might not know this. I was at the World Trade Center 9/11, and did search and rescue and picking up body parts for 3 days. That can wake you up. And surrendering to this thing that I've rejected my whole life, to understand, I don't need to put a label on it, and I don't need to adhere to an organized religious cult or tribe. I had my experience, and that works in my life. I have a great life. I'm deeply in love with the woman I've been with for 20 years. We have 2 amazing children, and our life works. And I don't think it would if I didn't open to the understanding that there's something much greater than me out there, and which seems to be the theme of this podcast with you today. And if Kurt Cobain had a better perspective, a wider perspective to understand that, perhaps that experience that he had of being tortured by his fame, he would have been able to navigate it in a much more healthy way. I am now working with a lot of Gen Zers. Just finished a movie with a young man named Aldo Budazzani, who is part of Prager University. I think he's 22 years old, something like that, 23. Holy shit. I can't imagine having what this young man has at that age. So grounded, so aware, but he has a background of faith, and he has a solid relationship with his father. And he kind of had an old school upbringing. He was in the Boy Scouts. He learned about nature. He learned about taking care of himself. And his view as a young man, even of women and the dating scene, you talk with him, you just think, this is like a 60-year-old man would learn by this age. Real honor, real integrity, real respect. And so all I have noticed from interviewing thousands and thousands of people is I'm always curious about people. When I meet someone that's doing well, or perhaps they're struggling, I try to get down to what is the difference? Why did the experiences of your life take you down, and the experiences and the trauma of my life bring me up? What is the difference? And a lot of it comes down to the understanding that there is this infinite intelligence that is always there, just like the cell signals in the room that you're in right now that you can tune into by typing in a few numbers into the keypad of your phone. You can connect with that frequency. And if we can start looking at it on a scientific level like that, not a dogma level where we're trying to be feared by the fear of God, trying to force feed this generation, which has just not worked. And it's turned people away from even considering that there's something else out there. But to actually have them understand that the benefit for them is learning how to navigate your gifts at the highest level and the way people receive them, so that you expand and get healthier and wiser and better and more fulfilled, instead of this trajectory of so many people that have reached notoriety where they begin to, like Madonna, right? They begin to deteriorate. And what I know is this, is in studying the people that we can identify as there's a lot that we can't identify, but the ones we can name, the George Soroses, the Klaus Schwabs, the Bill Gates, go down the list, the ones that we can name as being, kind of at the helm, consciously forwarding this anti-human agenda. Some of them hide behind, a false label of a believer, but the truth is, every single one of them are atheists. And I used to have a lot of friends and very wise people that I considered to be mentors to a certain degree, because they were so highly intelligent and they happened to be atheists. So I thought there must be something there. And lo and behold, the Neil deGrasse Tysons of the world, the Sam Harrises of the world, these guys have gone bonkers, man. Listen to what these say out loud. And that had me go, oh, wow, it worked for them for a little while, but there's an expiration date to that belief system that leads these highly intelligent men into the darkness of their own persona in such a way that if you saw Trigonometry just did a podcast with Neil deGrasse Tyson, watch it. The man's insane. And you see, Sam Harris, who I had so much respect for that man. I just thought every word that comes out of this man's mouth is poetry. I would love to one day be half as articulate as this man. What a beautiful instrument this person has. And now he's the man out there saying, I don't care if Hunter Biden had the corpses of dead children in his basement. I still would have voted for Biden over Trump, because, you hear this this horrible rhetoric come out of his mouth. And then he's been called out many times. They're like, you were wrong about the vaccine. Can you admit that? You were pressuring everybody, calling them idiots for hesitating. And now can you admit that they actually were wisely hesitating? And the man's answer every time he's been cornered on this is, it's ridiculous when you see these interviews of him trying to word salad his way out of responsibility. He basically says, well, given the time and the information we had at the time, I made the right choice at the time, because that's what science was telling us at the time. So it turns out I was right. And they go, no, but you were wrong. No, because given the information I had, I was right in that moment. So I'm right today. That's basically what the man says. You just go, how do you get that big, beautiful brain of yours to backflip into that type of a logic? What happened there? How did you lose yourself, Sam Harris? The man had such logic behind him before. And I believe that it's because they actually think they're the top of the food chain. And it's a very dangerous thought to have. There's nothing above them. They are just, and hey, this is a guy that coined a phrase years ago, we are just moss on a rock. That's what I used to tell everyone. Don't try to make sense of this shit, man. We're just moss on a rock. It means nothing. We're just this fungus growing on a rock somewhere and floating in outer space, trying to make it mean something. It means nothing. Let it go. That attitude would have led me to more of an outcome of what Kurt Cobain experienced.
Well, I feel like the danger of being really smart and really dumb is that you can convince yourself of anything. If you're really dumb, you can come up with some logic that makes no sense. And if you're really smart, you'll find some logic that makes sense of what you want to believe. And I think people in the middle are usually the ones who, are a little bit more open-minded, because they're not, they're not dumb enough to be tricked into anything. And they're not so smart that they're arrogant that they can convince themselves that they're right and fine. It's like that saying, most people think they look at the facts and come up with a conclusion. The truth is they have a conclusion. They look for the facts to back that conclusion.
Yeah.
And
right.
Yeah, so without a doubt, it's scary, because I had a very similar journey to you. I was raised a Catholic. My parents are Portuguese. The majority of Portuguese people are Catholic. I asked too many questions, got myself in a lot of trouble, and I'm just like, these atheists seem to like relate to me, because like they ask a lot of questions, and they highlight the fact that these things don't make sense, what my parents want me to accept, or what the Catholic Church or my Sunday school teacher wants me to accept. But as I got older, I'm like, oh my God, I just like left one team to join another team. These guys are more tribalistic than the other team. And, they think they have it all figured out. And anytime somebody seems to, or tries to come off like they know, I'm very wary. And that's the thing. Like, I'd be okay with atheists saying, like, we don't know, but they're all so certain that they know that you're wrong, or that person's wrong, or that's, wrong. But I'm like, there's so much in the world we don't understand. I've had Rupert Sheldrake on the show years ago. He's been on the Rogan podcast too. And I don't know if you're familiar with his study with the mice, and he believes that everything has a conscious. Like we look at and Dr. Tom Cowan, similar type of idea that like that water isn't intelligent, or this isn't intelligent, but he believes that there's some type of intelligence in everything. And I'm sure you've heard about the studies that they've done with water, where they play different types of
Dr. Emoto,
yeah, exactly. And Rupert Sheldrake had a study with mice, where mice would learn a maze, and then mice at a different location that have never been exposed to those mice or that maze would learn the maze faster, and it would continue. And this idea. And it's funny because it's like religious people, and then like the hippies, and a lot of old cultures that had this idea that we're all one. It kind of backs that theory. This idea that we're all connected.
It does. There was an experiment done many years ago called the aspect experiment, and they took I believe it's classified as a quantum particle, I think is the scientific term for it, and they cut it in half. And they separated it by a vast distance, and they manipulated one half of it, and the other half that was lying untouched responded. So even though it was divided, separated by time and space, it still was one. And I was fascinated about that when I studied that years ago, because the subject of oneness, the subject of being connected energetically, it's becoming easier and easier to understand, because our cell phones, you can call me right now and there's no cord, there's no wire. You can send me a photo. Take a photo in your studio right now, send it to me, and it will come through the airways, reassimilate itself to the exact pixel of what you just shot in your studio, and recreate it in my phone. It's amazing. But we don't even look at that stuff anymore. I remember being baffled when I was a kid, and I was looking, and I used to take that stereo system I mentioned earlier. Used to take everything apart. I remember looking at it one day, just going, how does this work? Got this paper funnel, it's called a speaker, and we got these copper wires, and they run into this thing. It's got crystals in it and weird condensers things, and somehow, and there's this antenna, and this thing receives a broadcast that comes through this antenna into all this circuitry, into these little copper wires, into this paper speaker, and it sounds exactly like the musicians made it sound in the studio when they're playing acoustic or real instruments. I remember just going, this is a miracle. Why aren't we baffled about this? We just take it for granted of like, how does this happen? And same thing about our new technologies. I just look at it. I'm just like, wow, this is incredible. For me, it's all an out picturing of us invent. I don't think we invent anything. I think we receive a kind of a download, an out picturing, trying to understand our future and our lives and ourselves. So we are given, like an architect is given a vision of a building, and then they write it out on paper, and then they create a mini scaled version on their desk, and then they create a blueprint, and then they create a building. It's kind of like, I think we receive these ideas that we call our inventions, but it's really like, is the internet, we were all at one point given a little box called a personal computer, and it sat on our desk, and it couldn't do much. It was a word processor. Whatever the factory put on it, we might be able to get a little floppy disk and put in a little new word program in there, and it types a little better, but it was just limited to whatever the factory put on it. Then we created this thing called the World Wide Web. And every little computer now is a supercomputer with access to infinite intelligence. And part of me goes, is that where we're headed, humanity? Is that our blueprint, to understand that we've all been operating off these little hard drives that were just hand-me-down informations installed by dad, by grandpa, by lineage, by school teacher, by history books. And now we're starting to kind of go online and tap in. We've lost trust in all the authority figures. So we're left thinking, then where do I get my information? Maybe there's something else that I can dial up and go online and receive. Is that where we're going? Because is that the thing we call intuition? Is that what it is? Is that the thing we call God? Is that what it is? I don't know. But it's an interesting idea to look at that and to think maybe that's where we're going, where we actually stop needing guidance from other people's opinions, to where we lock into this broadcast of, I always call it the broadcast of nature, because I think it's the safest thing to say, but this broadcast that's always there, that is always ready to inform us. I'll tell you a quick story. In 2000, when we created the Elevate Film Festival, our second film festival, it became popular right away. And we did our second festival. We ended up doing a tour for 3 years with the festival. And we were looking for all the most amazing things, that human technology, like let's bring all this stuff in that is always shielded from the people. And so this really incredible woman invited me and gifted me and the producer of my film festival. She had a workshop she was doing, a 3-day workshop called my internal guidance system. And 3 days. So we committed to it. And the first day I thought, I really wish I wouldn't have committed to this, because this seems like a bunch of crap. We sat in a chair, and she gave us whole instructions, and then she'd give us, things to think about, and we'd kind of tune in and I kind of feel it. I kind of don't. I don't know. Is this going anywhere, man? Maybe I won't show up tomorrow. I'm so glad I did, because by day 2 and 3, I got it. And this is a woman who said simply this: tune into the subtle body. Tune in. You have to be still enough, which is a problem these days, because everybody is so busy and our minds are always churning with momentum. No, the world is noisy. So we have to find stillness and silence and tune in with that. And we'd ask ourselves questions. People sitting next to me would say, should I marry the man I'm now dating? And the idea was breathe and just, it took us a day to clear out the noise till we could actually even perceive this, what we experience. And that is, your body is going to either contract and kind of have this shrinking feeling, or it's going to expand and open. And that's a yes. And that's a no. And I thought, what is this woo-woo crap? I don't know about this. Daryl, what have we gotten ourselves into? And he's like, yeah, I know. No, are we going to go tomorrow? Let's come back tomorrow. By day 2, I went, oh, hold on a second. Whoa, no, I feel that. I ask a major question and I go, I just feel it, like my shoulders are coming down. Like there's this, even if I'm not physically doing it, I still feel like I am. I'm contracting around this. I'm closing off. And then I ask another question. It's like, oh, that's a yes. Amazing. So these bodies have the ability to receive this thing we call our intuition and know what is the highest choice for us in every single moment. I'm still not good at it, but I understand that it's real. And I know that that's where we're headed. And that, for me, that's when we go online. That's when the human body goes online. Because now we're saying, I don't need to wait for what the president says or what, I don't need to wait for any of this. Is this the woman for me? Nope. Okay, moving on. What an incredible time-saving thing. Is this the job for me? Is this the boom, to be able to go, for some reason, I don't know why, but I'm not going to question it. It's saying yes. It pays me less money than this other job offer, but for some reason, I'm going to say yes. And I have used that in my life. And I've made decisions that felt in the moment like, this is probably not the right decision. Because on the surface, this one job offers way more money. It feels like it's in the direction of what I want to do. But for some reason, I can feel this distinct feeling of it saying no to that and yes to this other smaller job and thing that's going, okay, I'm just going to listen. And that's the thing. I don't know if I told this the first time I did your podcast, but I was offered $17 million to share the rights to Plandemic. And I verbally said yes. And by the third meeting, when we were about to solidify the deal, that thing happened to me. And it was just a absolute no. And I backed out of the deal. And I felt horrible because I already gave my word. I don't like to give my word and go back on it. And I said, look, bill me for all your time. I'm so sorry, but I can't do this. The idea was just a lure of like, what I can do with $17 million? Imagine how I can affect this narrative and what we can do. We're competing with major media companies. We have, working on a shoestring here. It was all the lure of thinking how much relief I'd get from having this money. But the answer was no. And I finally said, no, I can't do it. And I walked away from $17 million. And a couple of weeks later, that team that was offering the money, really good guys, they got set up, but they got indicted, their whole company. And the whole Plandemic brand would have gone down with that ship. I had no idea. I like these guys a lot. So there was nothing negative, no red flags. All I know is I can't ignore this feeling. I've learned that technique enough to know this is a flat no. And man, had I not listened to that, I wouldn't be here with you today.
Yeah, yeah. I truly believe artists and people who, who are creative people who are creating their art for the right reasons, they're not as drawn to money than the average person. I think to them, their art form and their work is the most important thing. And, you talked about coaching. I coach my kids in soccer because I'm Portuguese and it's against my religion, not for them, for them not to play soccer, but,
Football.
Yeah, football. And it's one of those things where, I coach because I love doing it. It brings me some fulfillment. As it takes up a lot of your time. Like you said, we're already busy. And then with like practices and then managing kids but to
Good
have,
for you.
yeah.
Good for you.
Well, it's like that saying, a good coach can change a game. A great coach can change a life. I never forget that these kids, I just look at myself like I'm just everyday Joe, whatever, but they look at me as coach, like a authority or somebody that they look up to or whatever. And I never, take for granted that that ability to affect them in a positive way, give them some advice, not just on the field, but off the field. The beautiful thing about sports too is that we are creating a very soft world of, kids, every kid's a little too sensitive, and it's you see it in sports where just like you get kids who just can't handle the pressure or don't want to work hard or are lazy or whatever. And to be able to kind of instill some of that hard work and ethic and social skills and all the things that come from sports that, as an artist growing up, I kind of just didn't really appreciate. But I'm like, you know what? Being a artist and doing something creative, yeah, I think as an adult, you can look back and say there's some beneficial things. But I also think the discipline, the social skills, the being unselfish, all those things also are so important, and you can get from playing sports. And if you have a good coach who can give you some good advice along the way and make it fun and give you a reason to be outside, get some vitamin D, sweat, detox by sweating and doing what we should be doing, and that's being in a social environment and moving our bodies, then that's important too. So I know you got a meeting. I don't want to hold you up too much. Thank you, Mikki. It's always such a pleasure listening to you talk and having a discussion with you and bouncing ideas off you and hearing your opinions and perspectives. I'm so glad that you're out there and you exist and you're putting out this amazing work. I think you've made some of the most important documentaries in the history of documentaries, and I don't say that lightly. Good luck with all of your future endeavors, and hopefully we talk again in the near future.
I always love talking with you, and I appreciate your support and all of your kind words. Thank you for the work that you're doing in the world too, and the father that you're being. I'd love to come back anytime. Just let me know.
Awesome. Thanks, Mikki. Hey,
Thank you, brother.
We'll keep in
Yeah,
touch.
you too.
Take
Thank
care.
you.